Okay, we're starting the committee of the whole meeting for February 28th, 2023. I'll start by reading the land acknowledgement. Town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it's located in the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize that this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. Okay, are there any changes or additions to the agenda? No. Okay, can I have a motion to accept the agenda? Councilor Rice.
Thank you, sir. I move to adopt the committee of the whole agenda for February 28th, 2023.
No comments or questions on that, I assume. So with that, we vote all those in favor. Oh, we do it here. Okay, you do it on the computer here, and it's a green and white button.
Thank you.
That's good. Okay, citizen minutes with council. Okay. And then we move to delegations and presentations. The RCMP third quarter report. 2023 policing policies. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the invite. So this is kind of twofold. So I'll talk a little bit about the highlights from our, we call it a P3 report. So it's from September to December 2022. And then I'll move into a little bit more about our APP, which is our annual performance report, that will go from 2023 to 2024. So a couple of the highlights from the P3 report. I know you guys were provided a copy of it. The first part of it is really talking about the different meetings that I had with stakeholders through the quarter from September to December, and then moves into a little bit more about our priorities. As I've said before, our priorities are crime reduction and property crime, police and community relations, as in the visibility of the police in the community, as well as enhanced road safety. So for crime reduction, property crime, as I said before, we have a new crew position that the member was just identified and is currently working in now as of January 2023. So we'll see a little bit more from his position as time goes on. But during this quarter, we did condition checks on 10 different individuals in town. Police and community relations, we did a total of 56 community engagements and meetings that were completed during this quarter. And enhanced road safety, did a number of JFOs, which is joint force operations with CN police, the sheriffs, and bylaw officers. And I just took note of a few of the violation tickets. So in September, we had 21 written, October 29, December 59, and then November 59, and December was 113. So I'm really trying to motivate members to do traffic enforcement, and not only traffic enforcement, but stopping vehicles, and it's part education and part enforcement. So in February alone, we're up to 100 tickets in February. So that is as well to do with the traffic position that was created last fall. So moving on to a bit of the crime stats that came up in P3. So we have criminal code stats are up for that section of the year. And I don't really have a reason why it would have gone up during that period of time, as well as our traffic offenses had gone up, but that would be in relation to having strictly a traffic member in that position. It does say, like I have a document, page 7 of 11. It speaks about persons crimes as well as property crime. And it does say that we have an increase in that portion. But that could be a number of factors that come into play. I know of a few people have gotten out of jail and then now been put back in jail, so we may see a difference in staffs related. Next page, we talk about staffing in the detachment. So our target right now is 17 members, FTE. In January, we now have 2 on transfer out. And in February, we have 2 more identified on transfer out and 1 member coming into the detachment. So we will be sitting by, depending on how the moves go, a lot of it depends on the selling of homes, buying of homes, that sort of thing, but that will set us at the 17 mark with those transfers. So moving on to the rest of the report here, some things that are coming up in the new year. So we're gonna have the hard body armor. We're having new body armor being purchased for the members as well as the body cameras. I don't have a date as to when that's going to be coming in, as well as new CEWs, which is our tasers, are being rolled out in the next year. As I get information, I will be forwarding it on to your unit so that you are aware that those costs are coming. So last page just speaks a little bit about the municipal detachment and our crime stats. You'll see that it does say at the top, it says continuing municipal detachment, and it's stats between 2018 and 2022. And our theft unders has gone up quite a bit since the previous year. So the previous year of 2021, we're at 25, where this year, or sorry, 2022, we're at 79. As well as the mischief and the cause of disturbance. So that has a lot to do with certain individuals being in the community. And then the focus then turns to them, and then we put them in jail, and then you'll see the crime stats go down quite quickly. Property damage, MVCs, is up quite a bit. We're at 78% increase. I guess that could be a lot of different factors, but we are increasing our enforcement quite a bit, so I'm hoping to see a drop in our property damage as well as injury collision.
What's an MVC?
On motor vehicle collision.
Okay.
Sorry. Is there any questions in regards to the P3 report?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, I'm Chair.
Yes.
Councillor Hawes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just about the new equipment, because you said the body armor and the body cameras are coming. There's other equipment too. If I recall, there was revolvers, that sidearms are going to be new and stuff. Is that being phased in? Like, is that happening where this year will be new body armor, next year it'll be like, how is that working? Because you said we'll be billing us for that new stuff. So I'm just curious on how that's going to play out.
So those 3 items have been identified as being tested and starting to roll out through Canada. So I believe those are the first things that we'll see rolled out to the members. I'm a firearms instructor, so we haven't seen the new pistols.
Okay.
And we haven't heard anything about them, so by that assumption, it's not something that would be rolled out right away.
Okay.
And that's why I said it as soon as I got information, because you will see the result of us getting the new equipment. So I would like to give you a heads up before it shows.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Riggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you may not be able to speak on this, but the Mental Health Act in 2022, it was high. 2023, it's high again. So do you know contributing factors to that?
That will actually be if you guys have the APP, we can speak a little bit about that. It has been a great increase in mental health. I believe there's a lot of factors that play into that. And good things sometimes will increase our stats. So we recently got an RPAC member, which is a Roll PAC member in town. By having her and her knowledge, it will increase our mental health calls because members will go to residents and say, these are your options to the families, and the families will in turn call us if they need assistance and they know we can help them. So I believe the RPAC position will increase our mental health calls. We also are seeing a great increase in mental health calls for drug dependency. So that is another key player in that, as well as we are working basically in partnership with AHS they newly have a mental health clinic open. They're on Wednesdays. So we are encouraging people, if they need assistance, they need help getting to this mental health clinic. So I believe all those factors are probably increasing our mental health costs. Coming out of COVID, we're seeing quite an increase as well. Just the changes that are going on. So I really think there's a lot of factors that play into it, but absolutely seeing lots and lots of mental health.
Go ahead, please.
So RPAC stands for,
Rural PAC members, so rural is the first one. So normally they're just PAC teams, so they're the police crisis intervention team, which is a police officer and a nurse. Our team right now, so they are funded currently by rural, so that's why they're the RPAC member, and they cover 8 different detachments. So we are just one of 8 that she covers, but she is stationed here, so we welcome the knowledge that she brings to our detachment. But normally they work in conjunction with a nurse that's provided by AHS. They just haven't gotten to that point where we have an AHS member yet.
so domestic assault is also up.
Yes.
Would she be working in that area too?
No, more so unless there's a mental health component to it, and at times there is because we all know as somebody's dealing with a mental health crisis, it also will affect a person's marriage and a person's family life. So it definitely could have a component to it. But we are seeing more, it's just a lot of changes since after COVID, people are going back to work. So there's just a lot of changes in a person's home, as well as, I guess we're looking at alcohol and drug dependencies as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Councilor Labarge.
A bit of a follow-up to that, I guess, is we're sure hearing a lot about that assistance with the police. You said 8 communities, so how far is this person having to range out from here?
It's a huge area. So we're going from Drayton Valley, Grand Cache, Jasper, Swan Hills, Whitecourt.
Wow.
The area is huge, and I guess as a government employee of 16 years, I assume what's happening is that they put somebody in this position, they see how busy this person is, they then supplement it with another member and they branch out. So as we get going, like this is a new unit, and she has to, it's not frontline policing, it's follow-up. So members will go to the call, they'll then do a referral to this member, who then follows up with the family, follows up with the person. And maybe we can provide them with a referral to AHS, maybe we can get them in touch with whoever they need to be in touch with, so that it stops the continuous call to the police where we show up, we can't do anything, and then we leave. So she's the follow-up, and as she gets a nurse, the follow-up will be that much better.
That's helpful because I assumed they were having to package this person off and take them to an incident in Whitecourt or Grand Cache, or
No,
a person to be ragged.
and response time would be
See,
nil, right?
All right.
So it is follow-up, and she does do her tours, so she'll go up to Whitecourt and do all of her referrals up in Whitecourt. So she does travel the area, but I think more than anything, it's the knowledge and the detachment.
that makes
she
more sense. Thank you.
So if there's no further comments for the P3 report, I wanted to go into the APP. So this is where you, as mayor and council, have a input into the priorities of the RCMP into the upcoming year. So as I said before, our priorities are traffic, property theft, and community relations. And on the front page, you'll see the number of initiatives that we take throughout the year to meet those priorities, and in turn, hopefully decrease the amount of collisions that we're having, decrease the amount of property theft we're having, and increase the community relations that we have currently with the community. So I look at the initiatives. Unless there is other feedback, I would like to keep many of the initiatives. I plan to change quite a few with the Yellowhead County, but with the town, I would like to keep the initiatives unless somebody has a suggestion or feedback as to how it can be done better. I did put a bit of a report together more for a current status of where we're at in the detachment and where I believe our focus should be. So we have as Councillor Rice said, our mental health calls are quite high, as well as our property damage, collisions. We are currently at, 2022, we were at just over 4,000 calls for service. And it appears, if we're looking at the files per month, they are quite the same. So in the summer, we're reaching the summer months, we're higher than the winter months. Calls for service are our busiest times of the day. We would have Saturday at approximately, halfway through the month. It's kind of our busiest times of the day in the month. And our top calls for service are the mental health calls, the traffic calls. And as we kind of go down the list, it'll be suspicious persons and disturbing things. So subject to any questions that you guys may have with the APP.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Voss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question about, and it's in regards to the RPAC member as well, but we've heard a lot in the past about the prolific offender program being successful, but limited in the amount of cases we can have in our community. Is there any chance of linking it somewhat to this RPAC member we might be able to increase the amount of people in our community that are under that program, or is that not in her scope?
I believe her plate is very full.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if it would get the attention that it's needed. I have put it under the umbrella of my crew member, my crime reduction member, because I would like, the prolific offender is not necessarily only the criminal that's creating property crime. My prolific offender may be somebody who's been caught driving suspended 8 times. That may be a prolific offender because they will affect the community almost as much as the others. So as my crew member kind of gets a little bit situated in his position, I plan to have a very sit down meeting and ask him where we're at with the prolific offender and how he's going to manage the prolific offender program.
Okay, thank you.
Comments or questions? Okay, I have one. It's not necessarily related to your presentation. What's the status of our backlog pay with the RCMP? Can administration or somebody tell us that?
I'm sorry, Chair, can you repeat?
What's the status of the backlog payment for the backlog pay for the RCMP?
Through the chair to the rest of council, there has been no update on the backlog pay. So we're still sitting in limbo, so to speak, on that item.
Okay. Do you have anything more on this?
I do not.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everything you do for us.
Thank you.
And the RCMP. Thanks.
If there is feedback and if there's certain initiatives that council would like. Sorry, Jordan, is this something that you would like through yourself to me if the council has feedback for the new APP?
If you would like to stick around, we could pass this over to Mr. DeBoldrop, and he does have a report with yours in here, so they can have the discussion today and refer it. So if you have to go, that's fine. We can follow up.
Well, I can stick around.
Who'd want to miss any of this meeting?
Councilor Hawes.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the recommended direction, please, that committee accept the RCMP quarterly report for information.
Okay, any questions or comments? Just waiting for it to come up on our screens. Oh, okay, all those,
Hang on, we've got we've got the wrong, this is the one
Yeah.
off.
no, that's the wrong wording.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, sorry. My apologies, but I have the wrong motion. My apologies.
Councilor Hawes, does that reflect your motion?
Yes.
Okay, no comments or questions? With that, we'll vote on the motion that committee accepts the RCMP quarterly report for information. And you can just vote for or against.
This came up the same one-off financial request.
Oh, yes, it is. Didn't change on our screens. Yeah,
It didn't?
no, should we shut it down and then? press?
Yeah, close the old ones, the new one should be up.
And it's the old one again.
Yeah.
I didn't get anything. We're learning a new system. So
Sorry,
we're not
Mr.
always
Chair,
like this.
Mr. Chair, just to administration, we have, again, the wrong motion. It came up, they'd accept the report for the one-off financial request, not the one that's on the screen.
We, just, on it. I'll just get more to the next.
Okay. All those in favor, sorry, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion's carried. With that, we move on to,
I'll make the second recommended action of that committee seek consensus to prioritize the following for the 2023 to 2024 year: priority 1, traffic; priority 2, property theft; priority number 3, community relations.
any comments or questions? Are we gonna vote on this manually, Jim? You wanna
Let's
get-
see.
Does that
Yeah.
reflect your motion there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna vote that committee seek consensus to prioritize the following for the 2023-24 year. Priority 1, traffic; priority 2, property theft; and priority 3, community relations. Please vote for or against. Thanks. And with that, it carries. Thank you. Was there anything else for that?
Through the chair, no, that was everything on that item.
Okay, we can move on to 5.1.
That was everything we had. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're moving on to 5.1, draft one-off financial request policy.
Thank you, Chair. I will pass this one on to Ms. Juke.
Thank you, CEO Pasek and members of the committee. On January 10th, 2023, committee discussed how to better manage the anticipated one-off financial requests brought to council over the course of the year. This report and the draft policy attached are returned to committee for further discussion. The attached draft policy, which can be converted to a guideline if council prefers that, captures prior committee consensus and administrative recommendation within its 3 main functions. The functions are a mechanism for such requests from forward. It provides mandatory requirements for such requests that they must meet before they are placed on a council agenda. And thirdly, an outline of the common parameters used in decision-making on such requests. Key aspects that the committee had directed be included are in there now, which is a maximum of $2,000 in monetary contribution for those asks as a mandatory requirement. Delegation to the CAO to approve in-kind requests valued at $500 or less. And to leave out the requirement for requesters to be registered nonprofits. None of that's in there. Administration is recommending to committee that you direct administration to return this policy to the March 7th, 2023 council meeting, incorporating any amendments decided upon today. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Comments or questions, please? No comments or questions? Councilor Hodges?
Yeah, I just, well, I have one, and I get the is administration recommending that the $2,000 cap be amended somewhat, being as how the example was for one event and it was more than 2,000, it was a one-off. So I'm just curious on what administration might recommend as a alternative amount as a one-off.
Thank you, and through the chair to rest of the committee. I would actually recommend no maximum amount, and my reason for that is, if you put it as a mandatory requirement, if you put any amount there, you will screen out from your view anything above that. Sometimes these matters come forward and they're considerable more money. There are other avenues for requesting funds from the town, obviously civic partnership policy and also the community grants program. But there are things that don't fit into those, and those do have kind of like windows of opportunity as well. Council always has the discretion to redirect a financial request to budget deliberations, bring it back at further discussion or consideration later. But again, if you put a mandatory amount in there, you are going to screen out potentially some requests.
Through the chair, if I could add a little bit to that, if council does want to put a limit, because I do agree with Ms. Juke, I think that we don't want to miss out on what may be exciting opportunities because they're $2,500 asks and not 2,000 if this is a mandatory criteria for screening. But one thing council does want to consider some kind of cap, we could simply have the title of the fund that we distribute money out of, and we just simply say that it has to be within budget. So as long as it's within the budget or the budget remaining, that goes forward. But depending on the dollar amount, if there's only $5,000 left in that particular fund, then we would not bring anything forward at $5,000. So that is an option if we do want to put a cap that still allows some flexibility.
Thank you. You kick things off by saying, we could have this be a policy, you could have this be a guideline. So what's the fundamental differences then one to the other? Like, if it was a guideline, then I guess we're not bound exactly to what's in the document, and that would kind of move around the $2,500 limit, correct?
Yeah, through the chair to Councilor Barge, exactly that. It would be a very flexible, and really it was just considerations for the council to have, considerations for them, what we recommend they bring forward to council. What you have here really kind of marries the two of them a bit, where it does establish minimum set criteria as a part of the policy, and it also kind of just gives some of the criteria that council may or may not want to base their decisions on. So it kind of it does limit it. It does through policy set out the mandatory criteria, but it also gives a lot of flexibility for council to decide on what they would like to fund and what they don't.
Thank you.
Councilor Eustache.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. I realize one of the criteria, one of the responsibilities of council with this is to designate a budget through the capital operating budget process. That said, it's difficult for me to come up with whether there should be a cap on it, and if there is, what that cap should be, without knowing what the budget for this is going to be. So I don't know if $5,000 cap's appropriate. If the budget's only 10,000, then probably not. I'm not sure, so I'm not sure how to address that. And I guess I'd look to administration. Is there a budget for this year? And for next year, is there an idea of what the budget would be?
Through the chair, I believe that the budget as of right now, we fund the majority of these under the council contingency fund. I believe there's $20,000 in there for 2023. For 2024, we don't really have a projection. We don't have anything necessarily planned for next year's budget for that particular fund. I guess that would be a conversation at the time.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. So does this policy, or is this policy going to define where funding for it comes from?
Through the chair, if we did want to say that, funding is to come from, or if we did want to say that it has to be within budget, through the title of that particular fund, I would recommend that we identify that. As of right now, we don't have that detailed in there, other than any request that come forward has to be under 2,000, but we don't actually identify exactly where it is going to come from.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that note, hypothetically, a request for $1,800 comes in, administration would have the ability when the request comes to give a recommendation on where the money should come from. Would that be the process?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, so for me, I'm kind of fine as long as there's a recommendation. So at the time, whatever the amount is, we would get it. And based on that, we could approve it based on the value, the importance, and where the money's coming from. So there's a check and balance there that I think would be comfortable. Without a recommendation from administration, would make it extra challenging. For myself, I guess my other question is, if there's an amount that exceeds the dollar amount we choose, which is 2,000 at the current time, the only other mechanism for that to come to council would be through a motion of a councillor to entertain that, or are there other ways for an amount that exceeds the maximum amount?
Through the chair, as of right now, the policy dictates that in order for the request to be considered, then it would have to meet the minimum mandatory criteria, which would be that 2,000. So as per policy, it wouldn't come forward for council consideration if it was over the above criteria.
So may I follow up, Mr. Chair? But I guess then I'll throw out the scenario. So since it wouldn't meet that criteria, could a councillor have the ability, if an amazing opportunity that is unique and unlikely were to come up of $10,000, a councillor would still have the ability to bring that forward to council's consideration in order to entertain that? I'm just playing out a scenario that something comes up that policy wise administration cannot bring it forward through this mechanism. Council still has the opportunity to entertain something by a motion in order to consider it for council.
Through the chair, absolutely. Yeah, council can go against its own policy. It's not recommended. If we do want to consider all of those, and possibly as part of procedure, any grants that have been denied, we can simply communicate that to council and say, as an FYI, but my one issue that I have on that process is what is likely to happen is these groups will come forward to administration. They'll say, this is what we would like. We would say, sorry, you don't meet the minimum criteria. And then immediately we encourage them to go and we'll say shop it around to the different councilors to see if we get a pay through. So it almost circumvents the process. And if the purpose of doing this is to lay out an equitable process that we can abide by, then I think I think it goes against the policy.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, in hearing that, I'll hear what the rest of the committee says, but I'd be open to just lifting the amount to maybe $5,000 or something that we agree upon in order to continue this process. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if the people who are requesting the money meet the mandatory criteria. Does this request come to regular or standing?
Through the chair, I believe this goes to council, correct?
To regular. And then at the regular meeting, then in deciding to provide support, council may take the following into consideration. So now we would be asking, has this been met? Has that been met? Has that been met? Would that delay the process?
So if I may, through the chair to councillor, not exactly. So the purpose of this policy is to ensure that administration has an opportunity to provide some cover report for the request to council, where those kinds of considerations will be spoken to. And so that council is getting a full package, and that it's not the case that in a meeting you're trying to explore from the requester or from administration these factors. You should be able to just provide you some perspectives on the request based on those considerations or others that council may think of at the time.
So I don't know, maybe I just missed the boat on this. I thought we were talking about this so that we don't have all these things coming to us for our decision. You know, somebody would like to rent a field. Well, if they've met the criteria, rent from the field. So maybe I'm just missing the vote on this conversation, or why we asked you to come and, give us this policy.
Councillor Race, I think a lot of the requests under $500 are going to be handled by the town manager.
Oh, no, I realize that. I totally realize that. So if it's something over 5, it's back in the council. And that was 500 in kind, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yes.
CEO, you were going to say something? No, sorry. Okay. Councillor Mustache.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this first draft of the one-off financial request policies is a really good start. There are a couple things though that I feel are missing or need to be better defined that are bringing me a little bit of concern. And I think the first one that I want to touch on first is where the funding comes from. My concern about not having a designated dollar amount where the funding comes from makes it so that it's virtually unlimited. Administration can always find some place where they could draw money from, whether it's from reserves or a designated fund or transferring some money. Anyway, there's always a way to be able to find money unless there's something put around it to define where the fund is and how much it is. And for that reason, I'd like to make a consensus request of committee.
Please go ahead.
So it'll be a new one, Jim. Like to see consensus of committee. Add a clause to the one-off financial requests policy. Defining that funding is to be provided from the council contingency fund. And I think I've already spoken to why I'm putting this forward, my concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's the clarification. Are you suggesting that is a 722 mandatory criteria or a 723 consideration criteria?
If I may, Mr. Chair. I don't really know where it would best fit right now. I just think it needs to be part of the policy that so that it states
where the funding is going to come from. That way, council and administration both have a good idea of what's in the fund at the beginning of the year when budget passes, and then through the year as this requests come forward. Everybody has an idea of how much money is continuing to be left available. My understanding is the recommendation is that this comes back to committee again. So I'm content to leave it to administration to find an appropriate place to put that so that it's captured in the policy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Labarge, was your comment related to this?
No, and I withdraw.
Councilor Hawes.
Yeah, in relation to this, I'll be speaking in favor of it. I think that from my recollection, the whole purpose of this is more accountability on council. And I agree if anywhere we can find it in the budget, but I prefer not taking it from our operational budgets from our different departments and have a contingency or whatever we call it, but have that fund available through council to make those decisions. And having that amount of money and where it's coming from will assist us in making those decisions, because then we can decide how much goes and what's left is there or not there, and then we wait till the next year. I'm hoping we have another coming up as to the amount, but I'll be in favor of this at this point. So, thank you.
Councilor Reyes.
So my question is with the document, not with that specific motion. So I
Wait till we
understand
finish
that.
with this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question related to this would be to the CEO of Panasek. Is there would there be any thing you could think of that could be funded other than the council contingency fund? Like most of these requests would be out of the council contingency fund. Could there be something that might not be that?
Through the chair, typically, if we did receive a one-off request, we would come forward and recommend that it come out of the council contingency fund. I know that it hasn't always been practice. I know just as an example, in 2022, there was a vacancy, and those financial requests that were related to economic development were taken out of the economic development fund because there was no longer any resources in economic development and there wasn't funding available. So there has been instances where we have gone away from the council contingency fund and looked elsewhere, but typically when we do bring something forward, it would be the recommended action that it be funded through the council contingency.
Okay, Councilor Session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I put forward the suggestion to fund it through the council contingency fund because these are discretionary requests of council where council's making a decision on whether they want to support the request or not. And I think the accountability portion of that comes from council knowing that the funding of it, if they approve it, is coming out of council's contingency fund. I'm just going to leave it at that. I think that's the appropriate place to have it from. In addition to what I said, council also has the power to set the value that's placed into the council's contingency fund each year at budget time. And I think that's an appropriate measure for council to be able to ensure that they're comfortable with the amount that's in the contingency fund to be able to fund these one-off requests. Thank you.
Councilor Labarge.
And I guess as a follow-up to that, I sort of solidified a little bit following this discussion. I really think, and I put it out there to the rest of the committee, that this should be a mandatory thing, that this is where it should come from. And I guess to take that thought one step further, then I would really like to see us not have an amount in there. You can spend 20 grand. And I would hate to see a good community thing not happen because we choose 5 and it's 5,001, or we choose 3 and it's 3,001. Just seems to be arbitrary. But let's solidify where the money comes from. Let's solidify how much money is there, and then not knowing what's going to come, make decisions as they come. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilor Reese?
Thank you. You know, my only concern with that is that they would apply for this monies and not the community grant money, because they know there's no cap on this one. So that would be my only concern with what you had said.
Fair.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, through the rest of, through the chair to the rest of the committee. So just to respond to that, I think one of the recommendations that you would see from administration would be that there may be a better way to fund this group, for example, through the community grant fund or civic partnership, or through the budget deliberation process. And that would be one of the things that we need to look at, because those streams are well established. Sorry.
Yeah, I can provide some comments to that too. Like there's other things I've thought about for criteria here that would consider that. And that is that is this request, is it something that could have been anticipated at budget time or at community grant time? Is this not urgent? Can it wait for budget time or community grant time? Because these type of requests to me should be things that couldn't have been anticipated in advance at community grant time or budget time. So if we consider that with the criteria, that would take care of that. I think they should be not stuff. You shouldn't be come in here and ask for money because you can't get your act together and plan it in advance. Should not be encouraging that. Anyways, okay, should we vote on this? Okay, no more comments or questions? We're gonna vote on seeking consensus of the committee to add a clause to the one-off financial request policy defining that funding is to be provided from the council contingency fund. And we have that here. Does that says the same thing? Okay, please vote for or against. The motion carries. Other comments, questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Reese.
Thank you, sir. So just to be crystal clear here, if we go back to section 7.2.2, the group has met the mandatory criteria. They've met it. And now we're going to go on to 7.2.3. In deciding to provide support, council may take the following into consideration. So all of those things listed is information we will have in the report that comes to us with these people who are asking for the money.
Thank you, Councilor Rice, through the chair to the rest of the committee, if available. It may not be always the case that we have that information, but those will be are primarily provided as examples of the sorts of information that you could expect to receive from administration, provided it's available.
Okay. So if we're reading the report and we're saying, you know what, here's some extra stuff that we would like to see, that would be the time to get a hold of you prior to the council meetings, so you are prepared to give us that additional information.
So through the chair to the rest of the committee, as a matter of course, when the request is received and if it meets mandatory requirement and it's scheduled for a council meeting, those are the sorts of considerations that the administration will immediately work with to compile for council's consideration.
If I may, through the chair, just acknowledging these are smaller requests and just to be able to do a report with all of the criteria, it is very unlikely that administration is going to spend that amount of resources to do a very fulsome, we'll make it as fulsome as we can, but we really wanted to put this in there and not only for administration, but actually for the community groups who are applying, because if they do want to strengthen their case, they have an idea of what considerations council would like to know, and that may be a part of their presentation or may be part of their submission to administration to try to strengthen knowing that council may make decisions based on these criteria. It's not to say council must or has to make decisions based on any one of these criteria, but we just wanted, it was more of a clarity piece for admin for the community groups applying and just to help guide the conversation a little bit.
That's excellent. That helps me 100%. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to make a consensus if I could. Do I have to give my chairmanship to somebody? Would that be you? Is you next in line?
Summary.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, my consensus would be, that I'm not sure I got the wording of this right, but it was what I was saying before, that the event is plannable. And that it, could not have been anticipated at community grant or budget time. So if it's something that we should have planned in advance and they knew about for a long period of time in advance, then it should have come through the grant program or the budget. I'm just throwing that out there because I'd like some discussion on that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Taylor. So we'll just, now that Ms. Davy Campbell has the motion box up, if you wanted to give your motion again, then she could capture that.
Well, the constituency consensus that the initiative we're funding is not plannable and could have and should have been anticipated at the community grant or the budget time. I don't know if that makes sense.
No.
I'm looking for help on the wording.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just get the wording up that you were initially suggested, and then we can do something with it after that.
It's not, that the initiative, council's funding is not plannable, and that it should have been anticipated at community grant or budget time. I'm not being clear, but I hope you understand what I mean. The idea is that if you put it, if this is something you had planned for 2 years, and then you come with a last minute request, sorry, this should be thought of at budget time, or it should be thought through the community grant program. Don't come to us with your poor planning at the last moment. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Council, any comments or questions? Councilor Haas?
Yeah, I don't disagree with this whatsoever. I'm just looking to administration because is the intent that is already in the proposed policy with 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, that would be part of the criteria is have they looked at all other avenues potentially? And I'm just wondering, there was also, and I'm trying to find it, but there was also some forms that yet to have been developed yet. Is it the intent of administration to also include potentially this into those forms that have you looked at all the avenues, have you planned ahead? You know, like when did you start knowing about this? Is that the intent? And I'm saying I agree with this. It's consensus of council, I agree, so that administration has their marching orders, but is that the plan?
So to respond to Councilor Hawes, through the chair of the rest of the committee as well. That was not necessarily anticipated specifically, but there is a mention in this policy that one of the considerations is redirection to another stream. And so it certainly could be built in more explicitly than it is. Especially the idea that if something can wait until budget time or wait until another stream opens up.
Okay. So based on that, I do agree with Councilor Taylor. Not sure the wording, but we'll figure that out. But I do agree with this, having this somewhere in there that it is considered, because I don't want, you know, again, a group to come and there is the grant opportunity, community grant opportunity. They come prior to that, you know, and that we want to make sure that they're using the appropriate places. So I think it's important it is captured in the policy, so it's clear. So it's also not wasting administration's time or the group's time too, coming to administration and applying or going through that administration, say, go to the community grant program, like that. So, okay, thank you.
Councillor Ross.
I'm gonna withdraw. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee. Mayor Michaels and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just struggling with this one a little bit. In the sense. That 4.1.4 says that we are responsible for redirecting them, so. The way it's written right now without this consensus that if they were eligible, they would come to us, but it doesn't speak on the timing. What I'm struggling with is if this intent is to stop the thing, how do you determine whether it was done before April 1st? You have till April 1st to do the first intake of the community grant. You have October 1st for the second. For things that could have been predicted before April 1st, how do you determine that? And if it comes to us, April 10th, they can't do community grant program. Do I want to eliminate them from coming to us for this? I don't necessarily. So I'm just struggling with what this would look like. I want to have parameters or things that say you want a decision before April 1st, but this is eligible for community grant program. Then administration tells those people go to the community grant program. You have time. If you don't have time, I don't necessarily want to exclude it. I would want that to come to us through this process and then us decide. So I'm kind of rambling, but I don't know if the intent here is going to be handcuffing some of these groups after certain deadlines. Mr. Chair.
Councillor Taylor, that was for clarification regarding your motion. Did you want to?
Yeah, I could. I'm not saying it has to be mandatory. It could be a consideration as well. Just something that's listed as a consideration for us to think about. I think it's something to think about by listing it as a consideration.
So may I follow up? The administration, based on this consensus, and perhaps we look at this at the next meeting, but would there be any preliminary thoughts on where this would go? Would this be a recommendation? I have no problem if it's just a recommendation and it's something to help filter, but if it's going to be any form of mandatory or screening process that doesn't allow it to come to council, then I struggle with it more. So any comments on where this would be in the document?
CEO Panasic.
Through the chair to the rest of the committee. So my initial thoughts and just reflecting what Councillor Stewart had mentioned, that it likely is better off in the discretionary part of the policy. And my notes right now is to add a clause that council may take into consideration whether the request could have reasonably been known and submitted at budget time, because it is really a judgment call, even though the planning may have been ongoing for the event. Possibly they didn't know the budget, they didn't know how much they needed. There is a lot of different factors at play there. So I think if council does want that included in the policy, I would leave that discretionary and I would leave that up to the judgment of council.
So with that, I'll support this and then have a look at what the draft looks like when it comes back to committee. So thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Taylor.
Related to that would be something that's related to that would be a request that's not urgent that could wait till budget time as well. Right. Okay. So the two kind of go hand in hand. So.
Thank you, Councillor Berge.
Well, I like that wording, but it doesn't anticipate the community grant process. So I think we want to, in that language, sort of think all of those things through. Thank you.
You, Councillor Berge. I had myself. I agree with this and I'm going to support it. I think it does need to be wordsmithed a little bit, but I do think it's important that you know, at the very least, it's a reminder in 7.2.3, the discretionary considerations section. Just as a reminder to council and the groups that are applying, you know, you should consider whether this fits better somewhere else, whether it's through the community grant fund or whether it's through a civic agency partnership. I think it's worth having in there as a reminder to council and the groups. I don't know if there's an appetite from anybody on committee to request a friendly amendment, maybe to add that it's in 7.2.3, or if Councillor Taylor would consider it. He did request some assistance in wordsmithing it to make it so that it's understandable and clear. So, committee, any thoughts, comments? Councillor Taylor?
Sure, that, well, no, okay. That the initiative, council is funding, is not plannable and should have been, should have been anticipated in community grant for budget time, be included into, section 7.2.3. Is that the section?
7.2.3, I believe.
That's what you recommend? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you.
Committee, anything further? Yeah, Councillor Barrett.
Can we take some words out of there?
If you have some
Sure.
suggestions. Yeah.
And I think all we have to say is that the initiative, could the initiative have been anticipated at community grant or budget time? So,
Councillor Taylor.
Oh, yeah, that, go ahead.
so it just in front of the word anticipate, yeah, there, right there, yeah,
Have been to anticipate it,
yeah,
take this out,
all of
not
it,
plannable.
take all of it out of there,
But
yeah.
could. Correct.
Yeah. The initiative, yeah. Could the initiative have been anticipated at? I would take the word that out at the very front of the sentence and put the word could in there.
So.
Oh. I thought you were just waving at us.
I would have worded it better, but I didn't think of it till I got here.
Okay, take the word that. Oh,
Mr. Chair, can we just a few minute break?
Sure, yeah,
My,
yep,
oh,
no problem. We'll call a recess for 5 minutes. We'll reconvene at 5:08.